This is Basic Atari 8-bit podcast.
Katie and the Computer, I got my advance was $300, and I had to split it with my illustrator. You know Nolan Bushnell, right? He'd put his arm around me and say, "Fred, how's it going in the world of the ankle biters and the little people?" You could hear a pin drop after my speech. There was just this embarrassed silence, like, who the freaking heck is this joker they hired to speak at our convention?
I'm Kevin Savitz, and this is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. Fred D'Ignazio wrote more than 20 computer books, including Atari in Wonderland and The Atari Playground. He hosted 4 television shows about computers and robots and was the gadget guru on Good Morning America. He was associate editor and columnist for Compute magazine, where he wrote the columns World Inside the Computer and On the Road with Fred D'Ignazio. This interview was conducted April 10th, 2015. Fred sent me 32 VHS tapes, a Laserdisc, and a pile of article clips, which I scanned and digitized and put all up on archive.org. If you would like to see the huge corpus of his work, go to the show notes at ataripodcast.com, click the links, and enjoy Fred D'Ignazio's work. Here we go. I know you from, first, initially, when I was a kid, from your columns in Compute magazine. You were prolific, to be sure. You had several columns.
Yes.
How did you get started writing?
Oh, okay. I actually started with my wife chiding me. And she said, "You're always
as so many things do."
Yes. She said, "You're always like, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer." And so one time we were living in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and driving north, and I had a lot of caffeine, and it was really a aha eureka moment, because I had this amazing idea of a little girl falling into a computer, kind of like Alice in Wonderland, and I got so excited about it. I mean, it was like a movie playing in my head, that we stopped at a Pizza Hut just across the Virginia border, and the Pizza Hut lady gave me a bunch of napkins and a red marker, and I just started scribbling these notes on the napkins for Pizza Hut, and it was the story of my book, which I'm trying to have some props here. My first book, Katie and the Computer.
You mean this one?
That's great. You have props too. Okay. So what was a wild thing was that it just ran like a movie. She fell through the computer and she met this really cool guy, the Colonel, who was like the operating system. And there are a lot of word plays. Colonel was once like the core of the operating system, KERNEL, but it was a military colonel.
Colonel, yeah.
And yes. And so she has all these fabulous adventures. And I was a programmer at the time and a computer science student at UNC Chapel Hill. And so I checked every step of the book out with about 8 programmers that I worked with. And so we tried to create an allegory of a real computer program working and this adventure of Katie inside the computer. And it turned out my secretary, who I didn't know until to this moment, was a man who was a starving artist living in the woods with a grand piano in a cabin that he built. And he offered to be my illustrator. And his name is Stan Gillum. And he then, as I described the book in words, he started to draw pictures. And he did all the pictures for Katie. And the great thing was I went out, I don't know if you've got this prop too. You remember this magazine?
Sure, I have a almost complete collection of creative computings.
I started writing articles for them, and they, after 105 publishers, Creative Computing picked up our book and became the publisher. And then when
Wait, you were rejected by 105 publishers?
105 at that. Well, this is 1979.
Yeah, yeah.
And a book about children and computers was just completely unheard of.
Right.
So it was a very novel concept. So they were great because then they put me on the front cover and I did a story about the book. But that book brought me to the attention of an agent, a writer's agent, and she then took me to my final agent, Ray Piekner, in Madison, Wisconsin. And then that man sold me 7 books just on spec. And so my writing career was launched.
Wow. So he just contracted you for 7 at that point?
Yes.
Wow.
So I then went on to write 7 books. I'm going to turn this. Anyway, I tried to find most of my books. These are some of them. Then over the next several years, about 10 years, I wrote over 20 books. And at times, though, it was kind of a challenge because I had contracted myself so far ahead that I was writing them back to back, like a chain smoker, only I was writing books.
Sure.
I had to get so many deadlines overlapping. So I even shared a book with a friend of mine, Alan Wald, who's a science fiction writer. We wrote a book together, Fred D'Ignazio and Alan Wald.
The Science of Artificial Intelligence.
Yeah. So this is early in the 1980s, but it was a great favor because I had to get this book out in another month. So Alan helped me.
Nice. Yeah, it's nothing like a book deadline to put the fear of God into you.
Oh boy. Yeah. Yeah, that and my wife, they're my motivators.
So your wife was bugging you to follow your dream and become a writer, and then this first book idea just showed up in your head.
It was like a pressure cooker
Yeah.
and caffeine.
Yeah.
And you know how when I don't know, I know you must drive long distances, right? And you get into this sort of state of mind where you're looking at the road and your mind just starts doing mushrooming, ballooning. Probably I hadn't had much sleep.
Right.
So that book was a chain reaction. Once that book was out, then my other books came very quickly.
Nice. Cool. So in your this is an Atari podcast, but I mean only a couple of your books were Atari specific as far as I can tell. I'm trying to find the list here. The Atari Playground by Hayden Books and Atari in Wonderland, also by Hayden.
Yes, maybe you have this one too. Then
I don't have Atari in Wonderland, and I have a huge collection of like 200 Atari books, and I don't have that one for some reason, so I need to fill in that gap. That one's in pristine condition. My goodness.
Yes, it really is. I must have bought this one as a copy to hold on to. I have a tub of books in the garage, and so I'm going to go out and explore that. You've motivated me to see what books are in my garage.
Awesome. So tell me about the Wonderland series. There was several of them, right? There was Apple. Let me look. Apple in Wonderland, and Atari in Wonderland, and Vic in Wonderland, and TI in Wonderland. So
yes,
how did that happen that you wrote a series? How much did you have to change the book from one platform to the other? Tell me everything about it.
Well, this was a wonderful experience. We actually wrote it in the Atari Basic, and so I was living in Roanoke, Virginia, and the high school, Patrick Henry High School, was 2 blocks from my house on Carter Road in Roanoke. And I freaked again because Hayden Publishing Company, which was my publisher, said, we'll expand this out. And I had the concept that in the book, every single key would become a learning key for little children. It was still an unusual idea in the 80s to have books for young children. And so this is just the graphics keyboard, but we wrote a book that would be any key that a child hit would have embedded in it a little learning program written in BASIC. And so I made friends, I'm not sure how this happened, with the David James, who is the computer teacher at Patrick Henry High School, 2 blocks down the road. And he asked for volunteers, and it turned out his entire computer class volunteered to help me program my book.
Wow.
So for weeks, then each child, young person, high school student, was assigned a key, and then I guided them with instructions for the kind of learning program, whether it would be learning your alphabet, learning how to count, simple arithmetic, colors. But we had every key then have a learning activity. And so kids wrote basic programs as part of their computer class that then eventually we checked and rechecked and so forth and so on, went into the book. So we started with Atari. And I, at that point, had just recently written a book about a little character named Denby the robot. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote stories featuring Denby the robot that prefaced every chapter. So there were stories associated with computer games. And then at the back, as you would probably recall, but I guess you said you don't have a chapter, we have the actual basic programs.
Yeah, you type in the program. Right.
In those days, you had to type in every single line of code into the program. And I promoted it as a learning experience that people program, type everything in.
Well, it was a learning experience because you had to type it in and you had to think about what every line was, and then maybe you tried changing things. And
that's right. It made it very open source for open source. And so it was very open. And then the book came together and immediately was so successful. Then that's when Hayden Publishing said, why don't we put this on all the platforms? And that expanded my books tenfold because I had instantly, so the kids would take home Commodore 64s and VICs and early IBM PCs and Apples. And so we had a version of the book on every computer.
Nice.
Yeah. So I made some wonderful friends with these young people at that time. And some of them, even today, send us Christmas cards. They're grown up and they have children of their own. I can hardly believe it.
That's great. And they must have been, as high school kids, kind of thrilled to be involved with getting their program in a book. Yeah. Exciting.
I want to show you. We lived at that time, I'll come right back, in Roanoke, Virginia. So that the town, every city I just lost the paper. Every city has its, city magazine.
Right. This one's called
the Roanoker.
The Roanoker magazine.
Roanoker, and I've immediately here, page 26. Here we go. They came to my house, and this is what things looked like in Roanoke. I don't know if you can see the picture on the Skype screen, but that was our kitchen, my wife and me.
Okay, and that article, I need to read it because this is an audio podcast. It says the D'Ignazios electronic hearth.
Yeah.
Roanoke's first, go up a little bit. Roanoke's first family of computers.
Yeah. But that was my most insane period, honestly, because you see, there's my son in his bedroom with a little robot.
Yeah, I see the robot.
Topo.
Uh-huh.
Topo, the robot. My daughter, Apple Computer gave my daughter Katie, from Katie and the Computer.
Oh, you named the book after her. Or which came first, Katie or the...
First came Katie and then came the book. And so Apple gave her a computer and we wrote lots and lots of stories.
Oh, that's adorable. She's sitting on the bed. She's got her little braids going on or something. And then there's the Apple II and a Cabbage Patch doll on the bed.
Yes.
It couldn't be cuter.
Yeah, that was that era of the Cabbage Patch.
Yeah.
And then I have a picture of our living room. And you have to describe it, I guess, right?
Right.
We had 26 robots that lived in our house.
Wow.
Well, I was doing the articles and all got me immediately plugged into television of all places. Mm-hmm. So I was doing eventually 4 television shows simultaneously and reviewing robots and computers on the TV shows.
Wow. So you've got topo there and some little like toy robots. What's the big giant thing you're leaning
Oh
on with the
man,
big
you
screen?
would ask me that.
Is that a robot too, or some sort of appliance?
He was the first billed as the first robot appliance. With he was a computer, right? He had a disk drive and a keyboard that would come out, and you can see there's a computer monitor screen for his face, and he would roll around the house and be kind of like my computer butler. And my greatest delight was to have them all running at the same time. So we had there's this little company that made little robot monkeys and spiders, and so I would string up strings through our house and have these monkeys and spiders climbing across the strings through the house. And my favorite story at the time was my wife was in the bathtub, and this wasn't an intentional thing, but I would often have these computers rolling around the house, and the one little computer came rolling through the door. The door was partly closed, and ended up toppling right into the bathtub with my wife. So she had a mixed feeling about all this, needless to say. She was happy for my success, but it was sort of a mania, and computers and robots were everywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to get back to it's a minor point, but how Apple decided to give your daughter a computer. It's like Woz just call you up one day and go, "Hey, Fred, the present."
Right. Well, what I did, I was lucky because there was, if you recall, the early '80s was this terrific bump in interest in technology and personal computers and robots. So I kind of rode that. It's like a wave, and I rode that. And so in addition to my TV work, then I got to be a consultant. So Apple Computer started inviting me out to Cupertino, and I met Steve Jobs and all of his lieutenants down through the echelons, and started consulting with them on this very new field of kids and computers. And so I said, well, we're just sort of like a testing ground at our house. So they said, why not have a computer in your daughter's bedroom?
Nice.
Oh, so I wrote a book on that. So I just sort of turned our home experiences.
Computing Together, a parent's and teacher's guide to using computers with young children.
Right. And so it's full of anecdotes that I wrote then as articles in Compute Magazine about my children. And so I wrote essay after essay on what life was like to have young children and lots of technology everywhere.
So in summary, what was life like?
Well, I can tell you a story. We had a program called the New Tech Times out of University of Wisconsin in Madison, and they would fly down to Roanoke, Virginia, to interview me with the whole TV crew. And they'd set up in my house, in Katie's bedroom or in the living room. And one night, they had turned our living room into a TV studio. And there were, 8 production people, including the sort of guard. And my wife was coming home from her work at Valley Metro at the transportation company, and she came through the front door, and the TV crew blocked her entrance. And they said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're filming an episode of the New Tech Times, and this is our TV studio, and you can't come in." And my wife is pretty forceful. And so she said, "What do you mean I can't come in? I live here. I'm half owner of this place." So she forced her way into the living room right in the middle of the shoot. And she looked up on the mantelpiece, and we had rearranged the living room to make it into a TV studio. And she said, and it was all men. And she said, "I can't believe you rearranged my living room this way. It's terrible. I don't want my living room to be on national television looking like this." And she ran right out and started rearranging things while we were still shooting, while the producer and the camera people were just sort of had their jaws drop open.
It's hilarious.
So it was that sort of thing. But most of all, she was, I think, pretty happy. We just had these sort of sometimes these collisions.
I have kind of the opposite story. About a year ago, they filmed part of an episode of the TV show Grimm in my living room.
Oh my God!
And
That's cool.
yeah, it was cool. But they completely rearranged my living room, and we liked it so much we left it like that.
Oh wow! Oh,
It's like, this is way more usable. Why didn't we do that? So yeah, we had to get some new furniture and stuff, and now we have it laid out pretty much like the Grimm people did. So.
Oh, that is great. That is a good story. I'll tell my wife that. You must have had more tasteful TV people.
Yeah, there's highly paid people whose job it is to set decorate and stuff, so they knew more about that than any of us. So you said you hosted some TV shows about technology. Can you tell me?
I did.
Those? Please tell me.
Yeah, I was on the Good Morning America show, GMA, with Joan London and David Hartman. And I was known as the gadget guru. And that was during my stint. Compute Magazine was bought by ABC Television, which does Good Morning America. So then I just became their go-to guy for computers and technology. So I would go to the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, and twice a year, Las Vegas and Chicago. And we do shows out of the CES. And then I would come to New York and do appearances on Good Morning America.
Neat.
I hosted shows on Roanoke ABC Television. We moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and I did Friendly Tech with Fred twice a week. I would go on a morning show there, the Tom York Show, and brought all my robots and computers in the same gadget guru kind of mode. And then I had a wonderful time during those years with TV companies sending me around to interview personalities. Mm-hmm. So one year at the CES, Star Trek software was big. So I spent a day with Leonard Nimoy.
Wow. And
so Mr. Spock and I were there. Now, it was not a good day for him because he had a cold, which was interesting in terms of foreshadowing or whatever. But this was, of course, a long time ago. And he was rapping a big Afghan the whole day. And he had kind of a croaky voice for Mr. Spock. And yet he was a very nice man and very friendly and hospitable. And so a lot of what we did was just chat about, as we all know, right, he was a very broad intellect, very smart man, and he had interests in so many areas. Mm-hmm. So that was a great day.
Wow.
On the other end of the spectrum, I flew to Pittsburgh and spent a day with Fred Rogers, with Mr. Rogers, mm-hmm. and spent a day watching him shoot his show, and then went to his cafeteria and had lunch with him, and I just hung out in his neighborhood for the day. And then they flew me to New York, and I spent the day at the Muppet Mansion. And I got to meet Jim Henson and a lot of the characters. And then they assigned, I don't know, he's a sort of obscure Muppet, but a big obscure Muppet. His name is Sweetums. Sweetums the Ogre.
Okay.
And he appears in some of the Muppet movies. He's like 7 feet tall. He has a person in him inside. And Sweetums and I then were the co-hosts for the new Muppet software.
Wow.
That was coming out. And but I was so starstruck by doing a show with the Muppet, not Fred Rogers or Leonard Nimoy, but Sweetums the Ogre had me so starstruck because when we sat down on a seat, he towered over me. And he was very furry. And I ended up doing, this may be an exaggeration, 26 takes of this one line, "Hello, I'm Fred D'Ignazio," or something. It didn't work. So he looked at me and he said, "Fred D'Ignazio, unless you get this right, I am going to eat you on the next take if you don't get it." And so on the next take, I got it right. And instead of eating me, he embraced me in all his furry self.
Wow. That's awesome. So, like the stuff with Fred Rogers, that was for, what was that used for?
Yeah, well, everybody was doing name branding and name brand software.
Oh,
so Fred Rogers had Fred Rogers neighborhood software for children. Since I got in with Katie in the computer and was started writing in this 1979 or so, I guess I had my foot in the door as the expert on kids and computers. So as this sort of unfolded with more and more companies offering children's products, they would use me as a reviewer or spokesperson similarly, I started writing for here I get why you and different magazines. A lot of my career, as you pointed out, was hundreds and hundreds of magazine articles.
Right. So we've got Enter. Hold them up. We got Enter.
Yeah, Enter. So Enter magazine is, if you can tell from.
Yeah, it's published by the Children's Television Workshop.
Yeah. I then started working for Children's Television Workshop. And I was their assistant editor and wrote every month they had a magazine, The World of Computers and New Technology. And so I wrote a column for CTW. And so that's what, led me there, because they were coming out with new Children's Television Workshop software for kids. And then I wrote for a lot of academic publications. The Computing Teacher, the Computes Gazette was, I think it was Commodore.
That was the Commodore.
Before Commodore. Classroom Computer Learning.
Okay.
Teaching and Computers.
Oh, I love that cover. Oh, that's a great man. That's just so 80s. That's just, I don't know. So period.
You know who this is? These are
with the hair and the big TV back there.
This is Alabama. So we had moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and with my notoriety at that point, I was able to convince lots of technology companies, including Sony and Apple and Radio Shack and IBM, and they gave us all this computer equipment, and we created something I called the Multimedia Cart, our, again, multimedia sandbox. And I launched a project in 13 Alabama schools for teaching and learning with computers. And that consumed me for 2 years. And so these are the teachers. The teachers on the cover of that magazine actually wrote this article on what it was like in the early 80s to use this multimedia cart. I was trying to extend computers to all the media. That was always my thing, was using computers as a platform into multimedia, into video and sound and children's creativity, writing, authoring in multimedia. So that was my consistent message throughout my career, was that your imagination has no bounds and children are, fully able to use computers as a creativity and writing tool. So
coming into the modern age for a minute, what do you think, in your expertise in children computers, what do you think of it now when literally a 2-year-old is sitting there and able to use an iPad and launch apps and play games? Is that a good thing or not?
Right. Well, I mean, and even then, there were the kind of split two sides of the question. I think overall, it is what it is. So I think that it's where we're at. I think, because I have grandchildren now, I have 5 grandchildren, and I have I have a 2-year-old grandchild, and then I have the oldest is 6. And they are, just as you described, they are very computer literate. All of them have tablets, and their parents hand me down cell phones. So on the good side, just as my wife in her talk says, kids of today are digital natives, and we're just digital travelers or visitors because we didn't grow up with these things. I think this is just the world they live in, and these are the tools that, like a pencil or a quill or something in previous generations, that kids can use to get along in the world. The bad side is then the technology goes in between each person, and so often it becomes a barrier rather than a bridge to connect us to other human beings. So even I noticed, like myself, I have a Bluetooth in my ear. My wife often is talking, and I think she's talking to me, but she's talking to this invisible person in her ear with the Bluetooth.
Yeah.
And I noticed that with the young people I hang around with these days, most often they've got a little phone or device in front of them rather than the group interacting with each other.
Yeah.
So that's worrisome.
Yeah. My goddaughter.
What do you think?
Well, I agree with you that my goddaughter, she'll have one earbud in and she'll talk, and half the time it's to me and half the time it's to her invisible friend, and I literally have to go like, was that for me? Are you talking to me or to so and so? On your phone, and to them it's all part of one experience. And
Yes,
if you're a little bit older, you're just like, my feeling is you need to be here or you need to be there, but man, you can't straddle the line and try to do both at the same time.
Kevin, that's a great comment. Our culture is evolving, and so you're applying a cultural judgment, and which I share, that real human flesh and blood people come first.
All right, so we talked about the Atari and Wonderland, the Wonderland series, and you also did the Playground series, including the Atari Playground.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. Did the Atari version come first there, and what was that series about?
Yeah, that one, I should have brought that book up too. Do you have your Playground book?
I don't have that one either.
So let me see. Yeah, I should have. It's downstairs, but that was the one where I fully created this fictional character, Denby the robot, and it was really the same type idea that we started with Atari, and we wrote in Atari Basic, and it was the high school students who did a lot of and David James, a lot of the programming, and it was very open-ended. I really got into the storytelling this time and developed these little mysteries and adventures. But it was people keying in their own basic code, and my inviting them. I gave them lots of structure. Prior to this, I had this sort of hodgepodge career. I'm not sure you know that I was a programmer in the basement of the Pentagon.
No, tell me all about that.
So I went to work because I wanted to program, and I went to work for Computer Sciences Corporation, and I was transferred to their office right next to the Pentagon in Virginia, Alexandria. And so I got so into computers. They were just going from punch cards at that point to electronic screens, where you could actually author a program on an electronic screen and submit your program electronically, whereas we used to have these decks of punch cards, and we'd feed them into the card reader, into the hopper, and it would read these cards super fast, right? And because these were high security, I wore like a neck full of dog tags and announcing how cleared for security I was. They couldn't turn over the program. You didn't know if you had bugs in your program till the next day. And they also whited out a lot of your program because it involves high security stuff. So
so you have to debug a program where you can't see all of the output?
Yeah, right. And the irony of the whole thing was I had a certain satisfaction that I was helping our boys and our women overseas and, in the military. And one day I overheard my superior talking. We were all in cubicles in the Pentagon in the basement. And he said, well, I think it's okay. This D'Ignazio character is quite a character. But it's really all right. He can't do any harm because he's really just programming the distribution of socks and underwear. So my distinction is that I was moving socks and underwear to our troops around the world. So I don't think I did any harm. Do no harm.
Nice.
But I learned my programming skills that way. And then at UNC, the biostatistics department hired me. And I eventually had a team of over 20 programmers programming for Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, we were looking for an algorithm that could be better at diagnostic efficiency than a physician, and that the algorithm could diagnose. And we were looking for hospital-acquired infections, not nosocomial infections. So in this time, I developed a lot of structure as a supervisor of programmers. So I incorporated that into my books. I made the books try to be as easy and structured for a new programmer. So these books are, I think, as models of it. You could get Atari and Wonderland as a mom or a dad or an older child, and I think it would be your entree into programming.
But then you also, I think, wrote a book called How to Get Intimate with Your Computer.
Yeah. I have that book. Do you have that book?
No, I don't.
Here it is. Yeah, there it is.
How to Get Intimate with Your Computer, a 10-step program for relieving computer anxiety.
And do you ever remember the national columnist Irma Bombeck?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. She, her artist, it's Hal Just, did the cover. The one who did all her covers.
So yeah, I need to describe the cover here. There's a Lothario with the smoking jacket on and a cravat. Is that what it's called? And he's got a glass of wine and he's like snuggling up to a computer, like a kind of a pet 2000 sort of computer, and there's with hearts and romantic flowers and things, and he's trying to get it on with his. with his computer there.
This was my first foray into adult literature, writing for adults. But look here. You can read a couple of the chapter titles. Can you see them?
Yeah, tell me some.
All right. So they are a tale of romance and seduction. It's your first date. The magic of touch. Going to a movie. Going steady. Things get serious. Stripping away your inhibitions. This is almost like 50 Shades of Grey. For computers.
50 Shades of Green on Black.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yes, your little black book, Guides to Advanced Intimacy, and so on. So there was, in those days, and I don't know if you think this is true, let's bat this around, is there was a lot of computer anxiety, computer phobia, and the generation of folks at that time in the adult world turned out to be my biggest problems. Is I would go into a classroom and children just ate this stuff up, right? They were just ready to do anything Mr. Fred said to do. But adults were so cautious, and I did teacher workshops where we would spend like an hour with a computer mouse, right? Trying to figure out, how does this mouse really work? And adults would be like stunned and horrified. When you push up, the mouse cursor goes up. If you just one touch, one click, two click, were baffling to adults. So that's why I wrote this book, to try to be in a silly way, in a humorous way, overcome the adults' computer anxiety.
Wow.
That was a big thing. It's hard to remember now, I guess.
Yeah, it's. I was in the younger generation, so I was just eating it up. But I read a lot of articles, probably by you and other people, about like computer anxiety and how to and I didn't get it. It's like, what's to be anxious about? You sit down, you start wiggling the joystick and typing and seeing what you can do.
See, that was kids didn't even see the problem.
Yeah, no, I
But
still don't see the problem.
Adults were the gatekeepers for me. The principals, the teachers, the parents. And when I did my adult TV shows, they would just, they'd scratch their heads and they'd just say, "You're telling me this is the future. I can't accept that." We're like, boy, I got to get around you people to the kids. They're my real audience.
Right, and the parents were the ones who had to ultimately need to buy the computers or the video games for the kids. Yeah, and
Joan London and David Hartman were just perfect that way, because both of them were like, wow, what is this new science fiction-y concept of a laptop computer, a desktop computer? And I took the first Macintosh when the Macintosh was introduced, Apple shipped it out to New York City, and almost the day or right that week of its introduction, I had it on Good Morning America and was showing it. At that point, the audience was 15 million, so that was pretty good. But David Hartman eventually hired me as his computer assistant for his family. So I would help his family. They were trying to use an Apple II.
Wow. That was one of the hosts of Good Morning America, right? Hartman?
Yeah, at that time,
yeah.
They were the hosts. Of course, you know Nolan Bushnell.
Sure.
Right? And so I met him in those days. Because I go back to the days of Pong, and when he was founding Atari and Chuck E. Cheese and the whole bit. And he was a larger than life man, or maybe he is. I haven't seen him recently. Very tall, broad-shouldered, big, bushy beard, and sort of a Santa Claus type of man. Just exuberant, charismatic. Anytime I met him, he always remembered me, and he'd put his arm around me and say, "Fred, how's it going in the world of the ankle biters and the little people, the Lilliputians?" Meaning the children.
Yes. So let's talk about Compute. You were associate editor and columnist for Compute and Compute's Gazette. And as I said, my introduction to you was through that magazine and through all the columns you did. There was the World Inside the Computer column.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that was the other one, On the Road with Fred D'Ignazio.
Oh, that's great. Yes.
Yeah. So how'd you get that gig, and how'd you keep it so long? Because, wow.
Right. Well, one thing was I had this capacity at that time to write an enormous number of articles and just be everywhere. It made me into a maniac. And so I wasn't home as much as I should have been. So as I said, they were bought by by ABC Television. Mm-hmm. And so then I started doing the TV work and the Compute. Compute then grew from the Compute to its sister and daughter magazines. So any platform they went into, then I would become an associate editor of that. I originally went to them as a publisher for Katie and the Computer. Mm-hmm. And they rejected me, but they said, how about we hire you as a columnist and eventually an editor? Mm-hmm. And then when I went on Good Morning America, they said, you have a very energetic personality, so let's have you go on and be the representative of Compute on Good Morning America. And so that's how I started that. And then I started getting gigs around the world even. And so I was contacted by the, I can try my French, Organisation Reconstruction du Travail, as ORT, which meant it's like a training organization, technical training organization for Jewish people all over the world coming out of Tel Aviv. Mm-hmm. And they have London headquarters, and they hired me to teach a robotics literacy course. So that I used that month that I went away, I proposed a new column, On the Road with Fred D'Ignazio. And I then told the story of taking multiple computers and robots overseas across the Atlantic Ocean to England, and living in England for 6 weeks. I lived in the headquarters of ORT, and my robots and I then had many, many adventures that I wrote about in the magazine.
Wow. This was before the days of TSA.
Yeah, what a different time. First I'd put the robot in a seat belt. They let me have a complimentary seat for the robot, and I would amuse the flight attendants by turning the robot on and talking. But then they said maybe it should go in the closet. So we put the robot in the closet, but it had a timer on it. So this was the hero robot, and the robot came alive, and it did create some worry. This was pre-TSA, but it created, because it started talking inside the closet. And people wondered, who is that that's gotten stuck? What passenger has gotten stuck in the closet? So, But we lived with the robots, and I kind of was lonely, so I became friendly with them more and more. And I tried to turn the hero robot into an alarm clock because it had a light sensor, and it had a hexadecimal keypad. So I was keying in all these instructions in hexadecimal, and its light sensor was so sensitive that if a passing car in the middle of the night drove by the window of my room, Hero Robot would come on and say, "Good morning, Fred Dignazio. It's time to teach your course." And so 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., my robot kept waking me up. So I almost shot myself in the foot with my own robot. Mixed metaphor.
Right. Nice.
So I got to write through Compute Magazine just to chronicle. They took me on because I was sort of the soft side of computers. They had many columnists who wrote code and described the inner workings of the early computers. But I was sort of the interface person between human beings and computers. My specialty was, the humor when and people trying to adjust to life in a world with computers and robots.
I'm looking at one column here called, the title is "More Ways Computers Made Me Smarter After Only 13 Years of Daily Use."
Yeah, I would just tell stories on myself that I would be in strange hotels and trying to prepare for my speech the next day. And so somewhat sleepless and full of caffeine. And so in Canada, I'm sure you've been over to Canada, in the hotels I was in, the faucets all worked instead of right to left, left to right, or whatever. Or that you had to push them in. So I had spent one part of one column describing that I'd become so brilliant with my computer coding skills that it took me half the day to figure out how my shower worked. It's just to get water out of my faucet. So I would just tell these stories on myself to, I thought, make people laugh and they, make them feel less anxious about computers.
Nice.
Oh, what you may not know, that I have two other reincarnations. One, do you have, actually I should show you this. There's a t-shirt. So we moved from Alabama up to Michigan.
Okay.
And so I started a company called Multimedia Classrooms.
Can you back that off a little bit? It's a little close.
Yes, let's get
Media Maniacs, Multimedia Classrooms, Okemos, Michigan? Okemos?
Yeah, Okemos. Very good. Good reading, Kevin.
Years of practice.
And so Alabama, remember, I had those 13 schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that was a good motivator for teachers. So when my wife moved us, she moved us around 11 times during my career.
Wow. What did she do that required so much moving?
Well, she's a transportation expert.
Okay.
And her career was taking off, literally blasting off. And so she kept getting transferred to new locations. And I followed her, plugged my computers and robots in, and, took off on my own. So the Michigan Department of Education hired me to do a multimedia classroom, set up an entire classroom that we ended up outfitting for about $1 million. And then I trained eventually thousands of teachers from around the United States and Canada. All the Canadian provinces came down to my classroom, and we did sort of a classroom of the future. And I started doing a TV show on the Learning Channel, and they helped me produce this disc.
Multimedia for Corporate Learning. Is that a laser disc?
Cooperative.
For cooperative learning. My reading's not so good.
No, it's good. No, it's all cellophane wrapped.
Is that a laser disc?
Huh?
Is that a laser disc or an LP?
Yeah, this is a laser disc.
Wow.
Look at the size of it. It's huge.
Yeah. Multimedia for cooperative learning, video disc, and computer software. Wow. That needs to be... I bet that's not online. That needs to be digitized.
Thank you. I should. I bet you. Because this is a true course on... it says an introduction to bringing multimedia into the classroom.
Nice.
Traveled down the electronic highway with multimedia.
Fun.
As I was doing this television show on the TLC, Teaching and Learning Channel, and then on Discovery Television, we had TV cameras come in all the time. And so we eventually turned some shows that we made into the video disc. And for a while, then I sold the video disc. Then my wife moved us again. And so then we had moved from video discs to CDs. Mm-hmm. So again, I know I'm asking you to read these things, but
it says Mud Pie Multimedia You Design. It's as easy as pie, with an exclamation
point. And this is my reincarnation at this point. I became a computer animation character.
Little avatar.
Yeah, an avatar.
Yeah.
And the Mud Pie, which is big in the South.
And what's it say? Read the bottom part for me. A CD-ROM.
Okay. A CD-ROM how-to guide about navigating the muddy jungles of the internet and the World Wide Web, designed for teachers and students who are ready to get down and dirty. It says back into the old how to get intimate.
Right.
One. Yeah. And so I have a picture of me. I became many, many different characters. One was Chef Fred.
Okay, you've got the chef hat on and the apron and all that. You look like a...
Yeah, along with the mud pie theme. Mm-hmm. And then here I am as, I'm not sure what I am. I'm sort of Explorer Fred in the jungle.
Right, you got the pith helmet on and look like Pitfall Harry or something. Yes,
exactly right. And I had a machete that I had from when I was a child in the Dominican Republic. And so then a TV producer in Florida grabbed on to me, and so we created an entire series of satellite broadcasts around the U.S., teaching teachers where I get dressed up as Jungle Fred, Chef Fred, Rap Fred. I used my teenage son's really amazing outfit and tried to rap very unsuccessfully. And it was a wonderful time because she had me do just crazy things, where jumping into swimming pools. Jane Matheny, she was a just very imaginative TV producer who would produce my shows that were then sent out by satellite broadcast to every classroom in the state of Florida, and then eventually with a CD-ROM, all over the U.S.
Wow.
So that was a period where the internet was just really taking off, the World Wide Web. And so now my shtick was to teach kids and teachers how to use the internet in creative multimedia ways. So that was, I think, kind of my last hurrah. Because then I went, and I became a community gardener.
That's funny. Around the beginning of the internet was when my career was starting. I wrote one of the first books about how to use the internet, like a 600-page book about just like what is Telnet and how to use Gopher.
Oh, I'm going to go review you now.
Do that. Yeah. What else? What haven't I asked you yet that I should have about your career, about Atari stuff?
Well, I would say about the Atari that the Atari had very many early manifestations, right? It formatted. Do you remember the 2600?
Of course.
So like a panel, yeah. And you could put cartridges. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my earliest stuff that I wrote about, like for Children's Television Workshop, was pre-Atari. And you have to remind me, the 400 had a touch-sensitive flat keyboard, right?
Yes. And
then the 800 had actual movable keys.
Correct.
Yeah. And then, but prior was the earlier video game machines that had, you've got everything. Yes.
There's an 800.
Oh, that's so great to see it. I love it. Oh, I miss the 800. I don't have mine anymore. Aww. Yep. That brings back great nostalgia. Those were the days. So the great thing was with Atari, with its video game background, was very into making things entertaining. And I love that feature of even the early game cartridges. You got hooked because Atari knew the value of drawing you in the playability of the game. So by working with Nolan Bushnell and the early Atari folks, I learned, that the first thing you have to do is grab the attention. Because at that time, computers were used in a very horrible way from the old days of number crunching, data processing. The mindset was drill and practice. That, the computers, they think through things. They can be like drill flashcards, computer, no creativity at all. And so Atari came into the field, and they just revolutionized games, video games, learning programs for young children, because they emphasized the excitement of the entertainment, going on a quest, playing a game. The clock mattered. The clock was ticking down.
Yeah.
You had goals to achieve. You had to move fast. I always credit Atari as such a wonderful time for teaching me the way human beings should use computers, as being more fun and entertaining, and not just boring, drill and practice. So that was a great time. I also went to all the robot conventions. So the world's first International Personal Robotics Convention in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so back in the 70s and 80s, there was a flurry of these little tiny robots being created, microbots, nanobots. I mean, they weren't really, but they were very tiny. And so I was in on that. As same with robots. They were seen as factory robots. They were scary, out of science fiction. And there was a revolution in people's attitude toward robots, that robots could be friendly. They could be small. They could be funny. And so that side of technology, I was always emphasizing the humorous and silly, goofy side. But it was a means to draw people in. And so people could use computers without the fear or restrictions that, they set on themselves. They would be excited about computers. And it made me a good interviewer too. I love working with you because you're just very friendly. You're very engaging. You make me feel at ease. That's a great interviewer style. And so I would like to do that too.
Awesome. And you mentioned science fiction. You wrote some sci-fi too, didn't you?
Yes.
Was it always friendly robots?
No. And then I created scary robots.
Escape from Robotopolis.
Yeah, nice. Look here. You describe the...
Tell me what's going on. There's a robot holding a dead guy or a sleeping guy?
Okay, I better tell you. Okay, this is a teenage boy. This is my book for young adults, YA. That's great. Yeah. I could write version 2 where he's dead. It's my fault. I said you read it. So his name is Homer, is out of sort of like Homer in the Odyssey. And he goes on an Odyssey. He is a sleeping teenage boy, and underneath his bed, these bad robots, this is Sting, apologies to the musician, Sting the robot, comes in. He's a giant lobster, and he burrows up from an underground robot city of Robotropolis and kidnaps Homer, the teenager. And so the adventure is Homer going down 7 levels down into the depths of Robotropolis and then having to escape back to the Earth. And it's sort of like a trip to Hades.
Yeah.
Greek mythology.
Right, the 7 levels, yeah.
To the netherworld, back to the world of sunlight and people.
So the monster under the bed is a robot.
Yeah. Yes. There's good robots and bad robots, because you hear the robot picking him up is Checkers. And Checkers was one of the many good robots who helped Homer escape and get back. Let me show you something, Kevin. Thank you for bringing this up. This was the first novelization of a video game. And now movies are novelized, right?
Sure.
To become print material. And So this game was the first to appear.
Okay, it's a floppy disk from the learning company for the Apple called Robot Odyssey 1.
Yes, and there, of course, were Atari, Robot Odysseys, and this was released 1984.
Mm-hmm.
So 1984, the software came out, and it was two-dimensional graphics,
Right.
just little blips of light on your screen. Essentially, it was a giant maze, troubleshooting kind of Zork, Dungeons and Dragons, but very two-dimensional mazes, and having you go through Robotropolis to get out. Mm-hmm. I then reimagined it as a real adventure with a real human. And so I wrote the novel, this young adult novel, based on the video game.
So did the publisher approach you and say, okay, we have this game, play this game, make a story out of this game?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the company, the learning company, mm-hmm. and I had been already involved with science fiction. I had been writing science fiction for teenagers. Here are some of my books. I wrote Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Chip Mitchell, The Case of the Robot Warriors.
All right.
These are not real Choose Your Own Adventure. These are rip-off Choose Your Own Adventures.
Yeah, these are not Choose Your Own Adventure. These are solve it yourself. There was a character, Encyclopedia Brown. Uh-huh. So I modeled solve your own mysteries.
The Case of the Chocolate Chip Mitchell, The Case of the Chocolate-Covered Bugs. And Chip Mitchell, The Case of the Stolen Computer Brains. Dun, dun, dun.
So Chip Mitchell was kind of like me, as I wanted to be, with 30 animals and robots and computers.
Yeah, he's got a computer and a kangaroo, so he's got everything you would need.
He's got the teenage boy life. It worked out well. His mom passed away. His dad was a busy businessman who went on business trips. So he was left with a kind of ditzy nanny, mm-hmm. and allowed to pretty much do what he wanted. And so I wrote all these solve-it-yourself mysteries. So that's why they came to me and said, how about writing an adventure book based on our game?
Nice. And how did that book do?
Robotropolis did great. I went to my science fiction editor at Tor, and Tor is one of the major science fiction publishers.
Sure.
So they did a great PR campaign. My best book for sales was this one.
The Star Wars question and answer book about computers. I have seen that book. I don't have it, but I have seen it in a library or something. So we've got CP30 and R2D2. That's a beautiful cover, sitting there on a futuristic computer with a flat panel.
Yeah,
screen.
Look at that. You're right. I didn't even think of that.
It's a thin screen. This book was published when, in 1980 something?
Yeah, it's for sure.
Yeah. They're pressing it on the screen there. It's like
good for you. You noticed that. I had never thought of that. 1983 by Lucasfilm Limited.
Nice.
So that got me a trip out to see George Lucas.
Wow.
So I flew out to Skywalker Ranch and spent the day with George Lucas. And it was fabulous because they were just starting their learning foundation called Edutopia, mm-hmm. that still exists and that goes into the schools to try to promote the values that I believe in, too, of creativity and imagination using computers. Mm-hmm. And so they hired me to write this book, as I was originally a ghostwriter for the two robots. And my agent fought, and I finally got a little byline at the bottom, written by Fred D'Ignazio. Because essentially, this is written by the robots themselves. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm trying to approach Lucas and Disney to see if we'll get an updated version with the new Star Wars movie. But this sold 100,000 copies, so
wow.
Thanks to the magic of Star Wars.
Did you get royalties on that? Or is it?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Nice.
The good part of writing 26 books was I got a little bit from each one.
Right.
Nothing great from any of them.
the
like
long tail.
Portfolio.
Nice.
My Katie and the Computer, I got my advance was $300, and I had to split it with my illustrator.
Nice. We haven't discussed. This is the other one I have, the Computer Parade. I think this one was also published by Creative Computing.
Yes.
Another kid
Look
book.
at that. That's my son and my daughter. So Katie is my daughter, and then along came my son Eric. So he's the other hero in the book.
Oh, nice.
And as always, I try to do a learning while having fun. So these are sound waves. So the little sound dragons are actually, again, it's a metaphor for how you produce sound inside the computer. It's still applicable today. I mean, it's still the same basic idea.
I'm going to read a page.
Thank you.
Dozens of volts mashed together like chains of sticky marshmallows. The chains rippled like waves. The waves turned into dragons. Out of the dragons' mouths marched a parade.
Yep.
Nice. I don't know. Pretty awesome. How'd your kids feel about like being on the cover of a book, and also the heroes?
Well, the nice thing was that they did I read them a lot of times, the manuscripts. So they were very participatory. In Katie and the Computer, she was the only one around then, but this created a controversy of a computer bug. And maybe if I might read the same.
Please.
Can I read a little?
Go ahead.
And then I can tell you the story. So Katie and the Colonel are flying through the streets of ROM inside the computer. And I always imagine the computer like if you magnified a circuit, a chip, or a circuit board, all the tiny micro circuits. So then I thought, this is like a city from an aerial view.
Right, looking at like a motherboard from a city, yeah, like an aerial view of a city or something. Sure.
Yeah, these could be skyscrapers or railroad terminals or city streets. So then I had them be lots and lots of these narrow streets that they flew through in this little yellow kind of World War I airplane. But on the right-hand side of the page is dark, shadowy. And the Colonel has just said, "Watch out, Katie, we may meet the bug." "A bug," Katie shouted. "What kind of bug?" "A mean and tricky bug," said the Colonel. "Where do you come from?" Katie asked. Colonel snorted. "When my helpers, like table manager, were created, one of them was to be a traffic cop who would help direct the airplanes from the CPU to Ram Tower. But something went wrong. The traffic cop never came. Instead, we got a bug, a huge and horrible creature that attacks our planes." "Yuck," Katie said with a shiver. "I hope we don't run into him." But there is literally a foreshadowing of a shadow.
It's a shadow on the wall. Nice.
On the wall of something lurking. And as you turn the page, ta-da, you run into the bug himself or herself. They swooped around the corner of a tall building. And there was the bug. "Come here," he roared. "Let me help you." "Don't believe him," whispered the Colonel. "He's trying to trick us." The Colonel dived the plane between the bug's legs. The bug lassoed them with his sticky bubble gum rope and began reeling them in like frightened flounder. The Colonel jammed the gas pedal to the floor, and in a loop they spun, like a merry-go-round gone crazy. The bug pulled them closer and closer to his hungry jaws. So, as a computer person, you know there's a whole lot of double entendre there. This is a loop, a computer loop, right?
Right.
And my daughter, when I wrote the manuscript, you're asking me about the kid's opinion of the books. I wrote, they pulled him closer and closer to his gaping jaws. But my daughter had memorized the story, and she would tell it to her dollies. And one day I listened outside of her bedroom to her retelling Katie and the Computer to her dollies. And she said to her dolls, the bug pulled them closer and closer to his hungry jaws. So she changed my word, gaping, to hungry, which is way better. And so I rewrote it to hungry jaws. So I tried the manuscript out on my children a lot and learned a lot from boring parts and the kind of word choice, which is very important. Sometimes their words were better than my words.
Wow. Did you ever get any feedback from readers? Like, I don't know, a child write to you or anything?
Yes, just as you found me now, and it's just a huge honor to be on your show. So over the years, I have a scrapbook of children who have written me notes, and then on up to grown-ups as they grew up, saying that they ran across Katie in the computer, or Chip Mitchell, or some of my articles, and now they're working for Google or Facebook or Apple. And I'm like, wow. But they said, I learned when I read your book and I was, 7 years old or 13 years old, I wanted to become, a computer programmer or something like that.
Wow.
It's a lovely thing. That's any teacher pleasure, right? Is to feel like you've touched someone when they were young.
It's a long payoff time, though.
It is. And as you know, I know with you broadcasting and podcasting and all, a lot of times you don't have your audience right there in front of you. It's not like a room full of crowded people.
Right.
So it's a whole lot of projecting into the dark. They're out there, but you can't see them.
Yeah.
As a live speaker, I used to love this sort of a sidelight, but I then just got into speaking. At my largest convention in British Columbia, hockey's a big thing in Vancouver.
Sure.
So I spoke at the World Technology Conference, and they put us in the hockey rink on a platform, so I wasn't right on the ice. And we had 6,000 people all around us, and I used to wear my costumes, and so I would just become the different characters: Chef Fred, Rap Fred, Jungle Fred, and I would run down the aisles sometimes, and I would play the parts of my creatures. Like when Katie and the Colonel were spinning around, I would spin around and go flying out into some lady's lap. So I had an unorthodox style. So the best was when I had a loose audience and they enjoyed me. So I was like an Atari video game for them. You expect to have fun. You expect to be entertained. But my worst time speaking was to the Massachusetts Librarian Association. And I must have had the stuffiest group of librarians, not to comment on Massachusetts librarians, but I came dressed as a rap artist with dreadlocks down to my shoulders. And it was like, hey, here I am, Computer Fred. And I had just done that same gig in front of the Dade County teachers in Miami, and I'd spoken in Spanish to them and had been Rap Fred. And they loved me. They cheered. I had standing ovation. And I went to Boston or to Massachusetts, and I bombed in Massachusetts. You could hear a pin drop after my speech. There was just this embarrassed silence, like, who the freaking heck is this joker they hired to speak at our convention? So I guess I kind of took things to the outer limits sometimes on computers and technology.
Nice. If you could send a message to the Atari computer users who are listening, what would you tell them?
Oh, I would say just that that it's still a exciting, more than ever, new world. That all of you Atari people who were of the day when Atari sat on a desktop or was a game pad or game platform. Now, in a sense, it's Atari world everywhere, right? With every little, like today, isn't today the announcement or the actual shipment of the Apple Watch?
I think
it's
so.
This week,
yeah.
Or it might be today. So anyway, we have the platform that you could write apps for, and we don't call them programs anymore. Is write apps for would be, a wristwatch or a cell phone in your pocket or wearable technology, a Fitbit. So, and I think the thing you alluded to, Kevin, with your godchild was half in the world with the ear pod and half in our world, that virtual reality is not going to come just as Google glasses and whatever those virtual reality glasses that make people nauseated. Real virtual reality is your godchild with the ear pod. It's a blended world of the future where the platforms are going to be on our bodies, in our bodies, part of our bodies. We will become more cyborg, more than ever, and apps and code and bionic collaborations between us and intelligent technologies and intelligent entities and intelligent mediators and companions are everywhere. So it's a wide open world where the platform is unlimited, where the kind of apps and the human interface has gone from very narrow desktop perspective. So you could be the Nolan Bushnell of the future. You can be Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak. You can be be creative, because the sky's the limit. Every part of the human experience is going to be moderated through invisible, teeny tiny wireless technologies. So it's a really exciting new world.
Yes, it is. Awesome. Great answer. Thank you. I think that's all I have for you. Unless there's something else that we need to talk about.
I only want to thank you. I am just so gratified and grateful that you showed up, and I'm glad you're out there, and I wish you well with your audience and influencing your generation of human beings.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If someone wants to contact you, I couldn't find a website for you. How can someone, say, email you? What can I share so that people can contact you?
Yeah, can you post my email is just fine. Sure. I would be very happy. And so do you want me to say it?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and say it?
It's just my name, Fred.Dignazio, and that's DIGNAZIO @gmail.com. And look me up on Wikipedia. That's so I'm so happy to be out there on Wikipedia, so it gives a good summary of some of the things I've gotten into.
I was reading that. I was like, did he write this himself? Dignazio is considered to be one of the world leading pioneers of multimedia-based education. It's a very glowing short.
I know. Well, I suspect my daughter, but she was able to. She's a good coder. She works at MIT at the Media Lab, and she claims some obscure fan wrote this. So it wasn't me, myself, and I, but it could have been a relative.
Thank you so much, Fred. This is great.
Appreciate it. It's good to talk to you.
Thanks. Bye.
Computers, they are here, a fact of life. But a lot of us are intimidated by all that hype and confusion, so we back away from it. Today, we begin a series of classes with our instructor, Fred Dignazio, to learn about computer terms. We call it Morning Show Computer 101. Fred, welcome back. Now this thing is going to intimidate me, and it's going to intimidate a lot of folks out there. So it's not all that bad, is it?
No, I thought what we'd do too is we got a computer here that is the sleekest, it's the latest computer. It's the Amiga computer, and we borrowed it from Command Computer over in Village East across from Century Plaza.
All right.
But we're going to move away from the computer just for a second, and we're going to go to something familiar here, a record album and a record. And the key to making any computer work is software. And so this is software, and I think it's something everybody out here isn't the least bit intimidated about.
I thank you for doing it, because my wife said yesterday, what is software?
Software is,
as opposed to hardware.
Well, the program you play on your record player is music.
Your record would be software.
On a record, right. On a tape cassette, your software is the tape, and again, it's music, sounds, voices, or what have you. Now, on a computer, it's just a little bit different. It comes on these little disks. You have one here.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes they were called floppy disks, but now there's a new little disk, a rigid disk. So I don't think the term floppy works anymore. But again, you have stored in here magnetically information, sounds, pictures, what have you. Well, there's a little device called a disk drive in the computer. And you take the software, you can do it here, and push it into that hole there until it clicks. And now you've loaded the software, and the computer records what's going on its picture screen. So here we have a picture of a disk that is known as the workbench disk to the computer. And you can take this device over here, Tom. This is known, you might want to hold it up. This is known as a mouse. And there's a whole new generation of what we call mouseketeers. And you're going to become a mouseketeer
I'm going to
today.
be a mouseketeer. Well, where are my ears?
Well, here are the mouse's
These are my-
ears, and what to do with those. Now, your left mouse ear allows you to select things, and turn the mouse over and we'll show people what a mouse really is. Underneath it is just this little ball. As that ball rolls around on the table and makes contact with the table, it allows this little arrow up here to move around on the screen. You can do that
All right, let's do that now. All right, here we go.
Move that arrow. Be
There's
a
the arrow.
mouseketeer and move
Anywhere
your arrow.
I move it, I can move it in. All right.
Okay, and then the left button up there will allow you to select things. So why don't you point at the disc
Point at the disc.
and press 2
Let me
times
do that again. Here we
quickly.
go. Get my arrow up there, and I press what? Twice?
2 times quickly. There's a little zzz, which means the computer is busy. And up here, and you have a window.
I can hear the computer's a little bit busy.
The little disc
Its
there.
wheels are clicking. All right.
It's recalling the information from the disc we just loaded on.
If you enjoyed these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.